Parshas Chayei Sarah. This week's Parsha, following the opening narrative, which is about Abraham's acquisition of Marsach Pelo, when Abraham bought what is now known as the Tomb of the Patriarchs, or the Double Cave. He then sets about to find a wife for his son Yitzchak, and he taps Eliezer, his the head of his household, his chief of staff, if you will. He sets him to task to find a wife for Yitzchak. Avram has certain requirements. We're now looking at Perek Chav Daled, that's chapter 24. We're going to start with Pasuk Beis, that's verse 2, and we'll go through 6. Okay, Pasuk Vav. So the Psukim read as follows: Vayomer Avram elav doz kam beiso Moshe b'chol asher lo, and Avram spoke with his servant, who is the highest-ranking member of his household, the chief of his staff. It says, Simno yodcha tachas yirechi, says, make a sign of an oath. Vashbiacha, and I will cause you to swear, B'Hashem Elokei hashamayim ve'Elokei haaretz, by God, the God of the heavens and of the earth, asher lo sikach isha livni b'nos haKna'ani, that you will not take for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, asher anochi yoshev b'kerbo, that I dwell among them. The question we're going to deal with is, what does that I dwell among them, asher ani yoshev b'kerbo, add to this? Avram, for reasons we'll discuss shortly, does not want Yitzchak to marry a Canaanite woman. What does he add to this description by saying, asher ani yoshev b'kerbo, that I am dwelling among them, among the Canaanites? We're going to get back to that. Let's look at the continuation of this directive that Avram is giving to Eliezer. Ki el artzi, but rather go to my land, moladati ve'el moladati telech, to my birthplace you shall go. V'lokachta isha livni Yitzchak, and get implicitly there a wife for my son Yitzchak. Vayomer elav eved. So his servant Eliezer responds, maybe this woman, whoever I find, won't want to follow me back to this land. What are my options? So do I reject the shidduch, the match, completely, or do I bring Yitzchak there? I mean, what's the most important thing here? Vayomer elav Abraham, and Avram tells him, be careful. Don't cause my son to go there. What's going on? Asher ani yoshev b'kerbo, I'm dwelling among them, don't let him go back. So some say Yitzchak can't go back to Haran, which is the place of Avram's origin, because that's outside of the land of Israel, and Yitzchak is an Ola Tamima. He is a complete, perfect sacrifice, if you will, or object of Kedusha, of sanctity, and he can't leave Eretz Yisrael. Okay, but what's going on with this? What seems to be geographic preference. Don't take a woman for Yitzchak from Canaan, that I dwell among them, and don't allow my son, have my son marry somebody from my birthplace, but don't let my son live there. What's in play? So, what's the issue that Avram has with Benos Canaan? So, we see from the continuation of this episode, won't get into the detail, but we see that Eliezer considers an unusual, extraordinary demonstration of kindness to be the qualifying measure for whether this woman, whoever she may be, would be an appropriate match for his boss's son, for Yitzchak. And Rivka passes this test. So there is one aspect, which is these attributes or characteristics called the midos, qualities. According to many of the Meforshim, Avram was allergic to the Canaanite culture. And there are many Meforshim, many commentaries who say that Canaan here doesn't only refer to the specific nation of Canaan, but it refers to all of the foreign nations, the non-Israelite nations that lived in that area. Just like the land of Israel was once referred to as Eretz Canaan, even though there were actually 7 nations that lived in Canaan. But Canaan is a name of a category as well as a specific item in that category. So we're talking about foreigners. What's the issue? Well, there are a couple of issues. The Ran, Rabbeinu Nissim, who is one of the early Rishonim, he says that there are learned habits and attitudes that one picks up from family and culture, and they can become ingrained. They could be, for example, among the Canaanim, he says, there was hate, there was envy, there was cruelty, there was anger, there was destructiveness, licentiousness. This is reflected in some of the later Meforshim also. The Ksava Kabbalah talks about it. And there's a separate issue, which is one of ideology, which is beliefs, philosophy. That would be the category of Avodah Zarah. Now, in terms of that, we know that the home that Avram came from was no less Oved Avodah Zarah, was no less inclined towards pagan worship than Canaan was. So what's the big deal? You have, as Chazal, the rabbis say in other circumstances, Halolo of the Avodah Zarah, Halolo of the Avodah Zarah. They're both worshippers of idols. So why do you prefer a woman from your birthplace to people of Canaan? So the Ran and others explain that there are certain attributes which are so ingrained that it's difficult to unlearn them. And that is the ones that we mentioned. Philosophies, on the other hand, beliefs. We know that people can have beliefs that differ from those of their parents. And sometimes it's a very easy choice to make. We even hear now of parents who have a loyalty to one political party and children who have loyalties to other political parties. We know that there are children who part from their parents in their religious orientation. It's a little bit more difficult to part from that when it comes to what become learned and reflexive responses to various stimuli, that a person can act with cruelty, with anger, with a lack of concern or empathy for another person. And those characteristics are a little bit more challenging to unlearn. So we see that there is a cultural difference between Canaan and Haran. That's one thing. The other thing that's unique about this is pointed out by the Yakar. The Yakar says, generally speaking, if you marry local, you hang out local. So if you hang out local, you're going to be influenced by local. So if Yitzchak were to marry a woman who comes from Canaan, he'll be hanging out at her family's house regularly. This was a problem for Avram, because Avram was promoting a revolution, a moral revolution in the world, which much of the world has been influenced by his directive towards monotheism and towards a code of conduct, a God-given code of conduct that requires people to be of a different nature, of a more generous nature, of a kinder nature. And that is an acculturation that takes a lot of work. And if one is regularly exposed to people who don't share that culture, that's going to be problematic. Now, what would happen if Yitzchak would live with Lavan and Bethuel? Well, there would be a culture clash as well. And although temperamentally, shall we say, in terms of midos, character attributes, his birthplace, the people of his birthplace were of a higher level, but nevertheless, they were still over the Avodah Zarah. They still were idol worshippers. And so the concern was that even if Yitzchak would marry a woman of sterling character, but would stay in her family's house, he would be influenced by her. If he would marry a woman of sterling character in Canaan, then he would be influenced, and there were those, but he would be influenced by the rest of the culture. So according to the Kli Yakar, what Yitzchak is doing is trying to cherry pick a woman of sterling character, but to bring the couple into his sphere of influence, and by so doing, protect them from corruption and from the deviance of the culture around them. And that's why Avram is insistent. Number one, don't let Yitzchak marry a local woman because he will be influenced by the larger society of Canaan. Don't let Yitzchak stay in Haran, in the house of, or in the sphere of influence of Lavan and Bethuel, because he will be in the sphere of influence of Lavan and Bethuel. And therefore, he's insistent. Number one, marry someone not from here and bring her back. Marry someone of sterling character and bring her here, and we'll build on that, and we'll build an entire nation devoted to doing the will of God. Have a good Shabbos.